Hello, everyone. It's Darlene from Digital Photo Mentor. I'm back with live photo editing session here on my Digital Photo Mentor YouTube channel. If you missed us last week, we had to take a week off because, let me come back over here. Oops, hang on. Because Missy, sleeping over there, decided to eat something funny, and we ended up having to take her to the vet. So we spent a stressful night taking her to the vet and having her do an overnight. But as you can see, she is sleeping, sleeping peacefully, and she's just going to hang out in the background. So I wanted to show you something because we had some questions about where to find information, if I'm doing a live this week or not. And I wanted to bring up the YouTube channel. So, assuming you're watching this on YouTube, if you go to our tab that says community, and every YouTube page has this, right? So, you may not know about this feature in YouTube. And underneath that, you'll see things like polls and updates. And you'll see here that we posted a week ago that we weren't going to be having a live that week because of a pet emergency. So there's also a couple of polls there asking you, surveying you on some information. So we'd love to get your opinion on things. So periodically, just head over to the community tab and fill out the poll. So if you're there now, you can fill those out after the live video. So if you are new to the channel, I just want to welcome you and say thanks for joining in. Here on DPM, we do live photo editing every week at the same time right now, and that is YouTube subscriber video. Let me try that again. That is subscriber images submitted to me. I am going to edit them. Okay, so my head is not in the game right now. I'm thinking about cats and things. So I'm going to edit the images that have been submitted by my followers like you. So if you'd like to play along and send me some images to see how I would approach editing your images, that's what you're going to see today, but you can submit yours as well. There's a link to a form that you can fill in to submit your images, and Rob will be placing that in the chat as well. And a link to that, you can just click to send in your images. So Rob is my husband, and anything you see by Rob in the chat, he's part of the team as well. So just seeing who is joining us. We've got some down under folks again. Linton from Adelaide. I'm hoping Trish joins us from New Zealand as well, because I've got some of her images. Hey, Holly, thanks for reminding me about the link, because I know we missed out last week. Right. So we got a lot of regulars that join us every week. It's good to see you too. We'll probably see Nigel, maybe Anne, usually Vivian, and so on. So without further ado, I want to get started right away. Oh, see, I knew we'd have Vivian. There she is, and Nigel as well. See, I know who our regulars are. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you. All right. So let me just get rid of this window. And most of what I'm going to do today is going to be in Luminar, because a couple of people said they are new to photo editing, and one of the people that submitted images is using Luminar. So I would like to use that so you can follow along if you are using it. I know Holly does as well. So welcome, Bruce. I think I've seen you join us before. If not, welcome. So I'm going to start with a couple of images that were submitted by somebody new. And again, if you want to submit your images, there's a link below. And if you have a question as I'm going along, please put it into the chat. So if you're watching on Facebook, you may have to register for StreamYard, or you can just hop over to the actual stream on YouTube and put your comments in the chat there. So if you're on YouTube, the chat is sort of just beside the video, and the regular comments are underneath. So while we're here live, you can ask questions and I will answer them. Okay, so I check the comments and questions fairly frequently, and I will make sure to get all of your questions answered. All right, so let me just dial into this first one here. Okay, so Albert submitted a couple of images, and the first one that he sent was this rose. And I wanted to bring this one up because I'm just going to read his question. He said, the images look strange when imported into Luminar. It looks bad. The enhanced tool does not give any improvement. The only way to get a good start is to choose a profile from my camera in the light section, which I'll show you how to do. I never saw this effect before in an image except for the roses. The JPEG looks good. Also, the RAW does in the Windows viewer. I shot with a Panasonic G80, so I wonder what that will do to this image. So there's a few things there. I would say the biggest, not issue, but the biggest reason that this image may not look as you expect it is because it's red. Okay, now on my screen it looks really, really vibrant, and I'm in here in the light panel in Luminar, but I'm going to try the AI Enhance or Enhance AI. As he suggested, he says it doesn't really do much. So all it's doing is sort of brightening it up. So what this slider does is it analyzes your image and tries to do what it thinks it needs for this image. So that might be brightening it, it might be increasing the contrast or decreasing the contrast. And in this case, it's sort of brightening it, but I don't think that's doing the best job. Okay, so Enhance AI is not, a magic pill, and it doesn't work always for every single image, but you can certainly try that one first. All right. Okay, so if we go down to the light panel, what Albert was talking about is the profile. Well, let me turn on my little cursor pointer here so you can see where I'm at. There we go. So I'm in the light panel and the camera profile is here. So it goes to Luminar default as the one that it defaults to. And if it is recognizing your camera profiles, you'll see them down below here. And as I scroll the mouse over, you'll see that it updates the image on the screen with that profile. Okay, so camera neutral, right, looks a lot different than default. Okay? It's sort of less saturated, which is probably a good thing. Scenery is going to give you more saturation in landscape. Vivid is vibrant overall. Standard is probably a good choice. And portrait's going to give you more orange and red because it wants to bring out the skin tone. So in this case, the thing with reds is they easily go oversaturated and end up off the scale in terms of the histogram, which means then there's no detail and you end up with sort of this red blobby looking thing. So I'm actually going to go with natural here as opposed to scenery and start at that point. But just to kind of go back here, I want to see if there's much difference because I opened this image in Lightroom and I want to see if there's any difference to what it looks like on the screen. So let's take a look at this one. Okay, so here's the image in Lightroom and it's already on camera natural. So let's change that one to camera natural. That's the one I was going to choose. So take a good look at this one. Okay, take a look at the colors and the contrast. And then I'm going to switch over to Lightroom and I don't see a lot of difference. Tell me in the comments, based on your screen and broadcasting this, do you see a big difference between this one in Lightroom? I'll make it bigger. There we go. That one in Lightroom versus Luminar. Looks a little bit brighter in Luminar for some reason. I'm not sure why. But let's take a look at the histogram. Okay, there's two ways to see the histogram. If you're not familiar with what the histogram is and what it does, we have an article on the histogram. If you could please share the one about why is your snow gray, please, Rob? You can also find a histogram in Luminar if you go under view, histogram, and it shows up this little small one here. Okay, but you'll notice that it's very small and it's kind of hard to work with. However, that's interesting. I didn't know you could do different colors. Learned something new myself. Okay, so just clicking on it, it changes it to RGB histograms. You'll notice that this histogram here looks the same as the one in the background of the curves, which is under the light panel. Okay, so if you want to see the histogram larger, just open the curve section of the light tool. Okay, so Holly said it looks the same to her, and the Luminar one looks a little brighter. Yeah, I thought so as well, Linton. So why that would be, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so let's go from here. So the idea behind using the histogram to edit is it tells you where sort of the tonality and the pixels in your image fall. So this one tells me there's a lot of dark pixels. So anything from the left side to the middle of the graph. The left is black and the middle is medium gray. So there's lots of tones between medium gray and black, and less than half of those are leading up to white. And then there's actually, in fact, no white. So see this little gap here where my cursor is? That means that there's nothing on the edge of the graph or touching the edge, meaning there's nothing white, okay? If I want to make sure I'm not getting anything clipped off the highlights, okay, I just hit J on my keyboard. And now it's showing me, if I go really extreme, you start to see these white highlights show up. That means that I'm clipping those areas off or there's no detail, okay? So what I want to do when I'm doing this is just bring out a little bit of white, and I'm not clipping, so that's fine, okay? I also want to increase the blacks, right? So that I do clip a little bit, and you'll see the blacks clipping in blue tones here, and I'm just using that J key again on my keyboard, right? Rob, if you could share a link to the Luminar user manual with our link, please, because a lot of these things like the keyboard shortcuts are in the manual. All right. Okay, so I've just increased the whites, right, and the blacks. And you can see I've got a little bit of blacks clipping, which is fine. And overall, when I look at the before image and the after, I've just punched up the contrast a little bit, okay? And to get that before and after, I'm using the backslash, holding it down, or you can use the eyeball, hold it down, or this little before and after slider, okay? So you'll see before on one side. So that's not bad. We can actually see the difference. So just by changing the profile and these two little sliders here on the curves layer or this curves tool, I've increased the contrast, but managed to keep more of that red in line, okay? The other thing that I would do with this image is potentially crop it a little bit, okay? Tell me in the chat, in terms of composition, what can we do to make a composition more interesting? Because where this rose is positioned in terms of the frame is right in the center, okay? So what can we do to position it differently so that it has a little bit more interesting composition? Okay? I'll let you think about it for a minute. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to see what Luminar suggests, okay? So I'm going to go into the composition tool and hit the purple button right at the top here. So what that will do then is it will give you a suggested crop. And I find that often it will crop in the amount, but not necessarily position the subject where I want it, okay? So at this point, I like that it's cropped in a little bit. I need to decide where I want to position this rose sort of on the grid. And Linton has already, or Ron has hit the nail on the head there. Another down under person. Welcome, Ron. I'm using the rule of thirds. And you can see on the screen here, when I activate the crop tool, you can see the grid of the rule of thirds in the background. So you want to get your image, or you want to get your subject out of that center square and into one of the off-centered areas, okay? So now I have to decide, do I want to leave this other little rosebud over here? But I think I'm actually going to crop that side out and leave this one, okay? I find this side, there's too much of the table showing, and I don't want that rosebud there because it's drawing too much attention away from this one. So I'm going to go with this crop, which was the suggested crop by Luminar, and I just rearranged it a bit. Okay, hit enter. Okay, so already that's a little better with the composition. Okay, so having the subject right in the center is just sort of a non-dynamic, right? When you have it off center, if you know nothing else about composition, just putting your subject on one of those points again, if I open up the composition tool, putting it on one of these intersections of these grid lines, you want to kind of move your flower or your subject over a bit. And if I want to really get it on that third, I could crop in a little bit more, like so. Right, so that's not bad. But I didn't mind the cropping that Luminar had suggested. We're going to go with that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Great minds think alike, Holly. So that's exactly what I just did. Yeah, took some off the left side. Okay. Yes, you could see the cat over there. she was the one that went to the vet last week because she probably ate something that she was not supposed to eat. And thanks, Vivian, for understanding. Yes, our pets for us are like our children. We don't have children, so they are our babies. So we get very stressed out when they're not feeling well. She was not eating, and she had a big air bubble in her tummy when we did an X-ray. All right, so, but she's all better now. So thank you for anybody who expressed their concern about Munch. Next thing I'm going to do is add a vignette. And this is something that I do on every or almost every image, okay? The other thing I could do is go back a step in the Luminar workflow and go back to templates. So now that I've changed the camera profile and the cropping, I could go into templates and see what is suggested. So up at the top here, the first ones here are always ones that Luminar thinks might look good on this image. So it suggested nature, which is fitting. Okay, so I could do a black and white one. I could do one of these. Let's see how they look. And I'm not crazy about any of these right out of the gate. Let's see if there's any here. I don't think I want black and white. Well, that one's kind of interesting. That would kind of actually reminds me of like a 70s look, doesn't it? Right? So it's kind of really sort of punched up the contrast. So that's kind of interesting. Nostalgic. Ooh, that one's kind of interesting as well. I might work with that one because it's kind of almost given it a sepia tone look and brought the red out a little bit more, and the green is less intense. So let's keep that one in mind. You can also go and look through any of the other templates in the entire collection. These are just ones that are suggested. So of the ones that have been suggested, I like that last one. There's another one of mine that's a favorite that I use a lot. And there's this one, Shanghai. That one's similar to the other one where it faded out, but the red is more intense here. So I'm actually going to go with this one. Now I think the red has gone really intense. So I'm just going to check to see if it changed the profile, which it did. So I'm going to change that guy back. Okay. So whenever you do a template, keep in mind that it may overwrite something else that you've already done. It doesn't overwrite cropping, okay? But you'll notice that it did overwrite what I did there. And it also overwrote what I did in the curves layer, okay? So if I want more contrast, I can still punch up the whites a little bit more. Now let's see what else it's done. Okay, so it definitely has done an enhanced AI. So in Luminar, you'll see these little dots next to anything that has had something applied by the template. So then if you want to see what it's doing, you can just go to each tool and toggle it off and on. I actually like this one better off. So I'm just going to completely reset it. Let's see what color is doing. Okay, so toggle it off and on. I like what that's doing. I'm going to take it a step farther and I'm going to go to saturation and possibly density and just turn the saturation of the red down a little bit. So you can see that it's only affecting the reds. Now notice when I turn up the saturation of the red, how the flower becomes just this big blob of nothing. Okay, so you really have to be careful with red, especially if you want to print this, that you keep the density and the saturation down a little bit, because it will really easily, oh, look what happens when I do luminance. Okay, so luminance on the red actually gave me a lot more texture in the petals. So I like what's happening there. Okay, let's go with that. And if you wanted to change the color of the rose, you could change the hue. So I could actually make it into an orange rose or a pink rose. But I like the way it was. So we're going to leave it as red. Okay, so that's the color panel. Let's see what else is happening. Now there's not a vignette on here, so I'm going to add one. Vignette allows you to darken or lighten the edges. And the beautiful thing about doing it in Luminar is you can actually reposition it. So here's a little trick for you. Dial the feather all the way down to 0 and dial the amount really low. So I'm going to about -85 here. And what happens is you can see the edge of this vignette. I'm just going to turn this histogram off. You can see the edge of the vignette now because it's a strong line, it's an outline. So that's the feather at 0. And I'm doing that because I want to change the roundness and the size. And then I'm going to change the position. And I need to know where I'm putting this because I want to put it right around the rose. So I want to be able to see it. I'm just going to click right on the center of the rose like that. Then once I get the shape and the size the way I want it, then I just double click feather to put it back to 0, or I might even go a bit higher, and then bring the amount up to something that is reasonable. So you don't want to do vignettes that look like that, okay, or like this. You want the edge to be soft, so the feather to be 0 or higher, and the amount to be something that looks like it's darkening the edges, but without you knowing there's a vignette there. Okay. So if you look at the image or somebody else does and say, oh, you've put a vignette on this image, you've gone too far with it. Okay. So scale it back a little bit. Right. Now you know it's there because you just watched me put it there. But if I do the before image, I have to close this. If I do the before image, look at the difference, right? You don't see the vignette now, you just see the rose. Can you see how it's already starting to bring that rose out? And I see there's a question. Okay. So Holly says, I know we can break the rules at times. If this was cropped as a tight square, would you leave the flower centered, or are you against the idea of centering? No, that's a great question. I'm not against centering, but everything has a time and a place. And I don't think for this one, it would add anything to it. Generally, when I center is if I'm working with like something architectural, like an arch or a landscape where there's an equal reflection in the water. Then often I'll have the horizon in the center because the reflection is just as important. So the answer is it depends on the subject. And I could try that on this one, but I don't think I would like a tight crop square. After making basic changes, does the template overwrite what you've already done? So as I just mentioned, yes, it does. You can make your own templates so that they only affect certain tools. But if the template that you've chosen applies one of the tools that you've already used, yes, it will overwrite it. Okay. But the neat thing about that is, though, that nothing is set in stone. You can just go and change it to your liking, right? As I did. I just changed it back. All right. So are we liking the direction this is going so far? Next, I am going to use or check on the mood tool. So because I applied the Shanghai template, it's using the Shanghai mood or LUT, which is a color grading tool. And let's see what that's doing. So that's kind of giving us that really antique look. Let's see what happens if I take it even farther. Okay, so it looks like it's adding some contrast and giving me even more of that sort of yellow tint. So I get to decide how much I want of this type of look. You can also mask it. Okay. So for example, if I want this on the leaves, but not as much on the flower, I'm going to use a radial mask to draw the circle, and it's going to mask it off the flower. Okay. So now you can see that it's affecting that background, but it's not affecting the rose. If I decide, okay, I like it affecting the rose, but only a little bit, I can paint it back in with a lower opacity, right? So the mask is fully editable. I'll make sure I get all those leaves. And now you can see wherever it's red, that's where the mask is, and that's where the effect is applying, right? Let's turn it on and off. I'm pretty happy with that. And again, whenever you're doing editing, it's a dance, right? So I increased the mood, and now you'll see that it's gotten a little bit dark. So I'm going to punch up the whites a bit more again. Okay, so I do that as opposed to, look at the difference if I'm just going to leave this here, punch up the whites versus exposure. Okay, so exposure brightens everything versus pulling the whites, which is in here or on the curves. Okay, curves is the right one here is whites. So pulling this up just increases the brightest areas of the picture. Can you see the bright parts getting brighter, but it's not affecting the dark parts? Okay, so you'll get more contrast this way than you will if you just increase exposure. Okay, and I think that's actually pretty good. We could go in here and play with super contrast a little bit, which is a fun one. So this just adds contrast into either the highlights, midtones, or shadows. Let's see what that's doing. So if I bring this up stronger, I can either darken the midtones or increase the contrast in the midtones, which kind of is working well. Okay. Let's see what that's doing. That's nice. Now make sure our red is not going too crazy again. Okay, so I'm going to check my saturation and dial it down just another little bit. Like so. There might be some orange in that flower. Yep, orange. Okay, so often there's two colors involved. You may think that something is magenta, but it might actually have purple and magenta, and likewise with grass. Okay, if I wanted to do these leaves here, they're probably not as much green, right, as there is yellow as well. Not so much on this one, but grass has a lot of yellow in it. Okay, so let's take a look at the before again, and that's where I'm at. Now with this one here, there's some kind of funky things happening on the leaves. So if you wanted to get rid of that, you could use the erase tool. These little white marks here. So it's hard to see because I'm drawing over a red flower and it's drawing it in red. I wish it would give me an option to change that color. And then once I hit erase, it's just going to remove those for me. Boom. Okay, so I'm just getting rid of these little sort of white marks on the rows. And my recommendation for when you're using the erase tool is do it little by little. So if you have a big project or a big job to erase, do a little bit, see how it works, and then do another little bit. Okay, that's why I didn't do this last white part. I wanted to see how it did the other parts first, and then I left this one to the end. Okay. Looking good. And then the last one I might do is just check the leaves to see if there's, bird poop or anything else that I might want to remove. So then I'm just going to back out. Oops. And there's our before and after. Okay, so the idea behind the processing is to really bring out the subject and make the subject shine. Have we done that here? Have I successfully made the rose pop off the screen, as Holly is saying? So she's saying yes. So awesome. Thanks, Holly. So I'm hoping that's helpful for Albert, who is new to processing. And Rob, if you could share the link to our 5-day photo editing challenge. If you are brand new to photo editing and you've never done any editing before, what I recommend that you try is Luminar. So I know Holly can attest. I think she has done my challenge. I think Linton has as well. And what you get with the 5-day challenge is you sign up and you get my raw file every day. I send you a raw file to download, a trial version for Luminar AI, and a tutorial every day that will teach you a new way to use the program on that particular edit, right, on that particular image. Okay, so you can learn to do things like this and see how you would like the program and see how easy it works, right? Holly said she did both the 7-day, which was the old one for Luminar 4, and the 5-day challenge, and they were very helpful. Awesome. Correct me if I'm wrong, Linton, but I do believe that it convinced you to finally invest in Luminar. Am I correct with that? So I'm going to move on to another image. So today is about flowers and landscape. So I'm going to do a landscape one next. And this one was submitted by Kathleen several weeks ago. And I'm going to start with, actually, let's see. This is a raw file shot in Canon, so I can tell because it's CR2 down here, right? So I can see all her metadata, what camera she used, ADD, 24 to 105, so nice lens, right? And she shot this at -1 exposure compensation. So I'm guessing that's because of the brightness of the sky. And what's happened is I think it's actually a little bit overexposed now. Okay, so if we look at the histogram, you can tell if your image is over or underexposed. The rose was underexposed because there was a gap on the right side. There was nothing white. This one is a tad bit overexposed because if you look here where the information ends, there's a gap between the darkest tone and black, meaning there's nothing black in this image. Okay, so I can adjust that, but I want to try some templates first. Again, let's see what they suggest. Ooh, infrared. Ooh, that's interesting. Now, this is one that I actually bought from somebody. So these don't come with Luminar, but I want to see what these do. So these are designed to work on infrared shot images. But I just thought, hey, what happens if I choose something? Because that one actually looks quite good. So let me go back here. Now, I think that I'm doing urban style, which I'm not. Landscapes, probably most appropriate. Long exposure, this is one I use a lot, and you can see that it's got a heart by it, which means that I've added it to my favorites. Okay, so if I take a look at the before and after, look at what it's doing. It's doing a really nice job on this image right out of the gate. Okay, sunset is warmer. I know there's also another one that will give me, that one's good too. Okay, I find they're all a little bit pink looking, so that's something that we could correct. And I know that this one here, Toscana, does a sky replacement. So that's actually something I wanted to see how it would look on this image, right? Come on. There we go. All right, so now that's really pink. That's really, really pink. I think I have another one that's edited. Let's see. Let's go with this one, and we can go from here and make some changes. Actually, I'm going to go back to that other one. So again, I want to pick one that's going to give me something closest to what I want, and I'll edit from there. So I like what it's doing in the trees here. And I'm going to go and check all of the things it's done. Would we do anything composition-wise here, right? Bye, Linton. Take care. We'll see you next week. Would you do anything composition-wise here in terms of cropping this image, okay? The issue that I'm concerned about is these little reeds or grasses down here at the bottom are kind of distracting because they're picking up a lot of light and they're not in focus. Okay, so I would have either included more of them to give a bit more foreground or get rid of them. Now, there's two ways to get rid of them. We could crop them out, but let's see what Luminar suggests for composition, or we could erase them. Okay. So Luminar is suggesting that we crop some from the bottom. And if I move this over a little bit, I think I would tend to agree with this crop. I'm going to go right about there. And we're going to do a couple of things with the erase tool after. So what I'm looking at is where's my horizon. Okay, so there's sort of three distinct layers in this image now. There's the front or foreground layer, which is these spruce trees, the pine trees, the ones in the middle, which go down into the valley, and then these mountains and sky in the third layer. So this is a really nice layered image that has lots of depth. So kudos to Catherine when you took this, because it's got a lot of nice depth to the image. It feels like you can go into it for days, okay? So you want that with your images. I'm going to check the camera profile again, okay? Let's see what we can do if we find, oh, there's a landscape one. Let's see how that looks. Landscape, that's pretty blue. Let's see about neutral. Portrait's going to give me more orange, so I'm going to go with neutral, and I'm going to warm it up a little bit here. Okay, so white balance is what you want to adjust for color. Okay, so I recently redid an article that I did quite a number of years ago on white balance and updated it. Rob, if you could please share a link to the white balance article, please. Okay, so I'm just going to see what happens if I choose some of these different white balance settings. I'm going to try cloudy. So even though it's not a super cloudy day, it's hazy. Look what happens when I choose cloudy. It gives me a lot more yellow and green, and it gets rid of that sort of pink tinge. Okay, so I'm going to start there and maybe a little bit less yellow, about like that. Let's try something like that. So before and after, we've already got a whole bunch more punch. We can see that the image itself, the Enhance AI has been applied, and that's what's bringing up a lot of that detail. So in this image, that Enhance AI is doing a really good job. If I pull up the sky enhancer, you can see that there actually is some detail in the sky. So if I want to keep this sky and keep the haze, right, we could just pull this down and create a little bit more information in the sky. And we can do that under the light panel as well by pulling down the highlight slider. I'm also going to correct this curve that was applied with the template because it's bumping up this area. Okay, so to understand curves, I've got a full video on how to understand and use curves in your images. If you could please share that one, Rob. I also noticed there's some weird spots in the sky, and I think that's probably something being masked in. So I'm going to check that in a bit. But inside the curve here, what this curve is doing is it's brightening the highlights a bit and darkening these shadows. And I'm just going to bring this one down because I don't want to brighten those highlights, right? So look what happens when I bring that down, right? You can see that that's applying to that area. And I'm just going to bring that there, okay? Then I'm going to bring the highlight slider down, and now you can see that there actually is clouds there, okay? But they're just super, super overexposed. So if she had given the image a little bit less exposure, even though it's a raw file, we would probably have more sky information to work with. So because it starts to get muddy, right, when you zoom in here, you're not going to get good detail. And you may notice also that the sky starts to look grainy. Let me zoom into 200%. So when you look at the sky at 200%, that's double the pixel size. Okay, can you see this grain here? I don't know if you can see it on your screen or not. When you pull an image really far with the processing, even if you shot it at a low ISO to keep the noise level down, if you process your image sort of over the top to the nth degree, you're going to start getting noise in your image like this. Okay, so you have to be really careful of not overdoing the processing. And I'm actually going to leave the highlights the way they were. And even under here, I'm going to leave the sky a little brighter because I'm going to go do a sky replacement, right? And see if we can't get something a little bit more interesting. Back in the light panel, I am going to bring the exposure down, which is going to bring my midtones down a little bit. So you can see when I bring that down, it affects everything, okay? Now the darks in the foreground are making a really nice base, okay, which is what I want. I'm going to do my usual. So there is a vignette been applied. I'm going to check to see where it is. Okay, so it looks like it's right in the middle, which is probably okay for this one. And it was looking like it was feathered nicely. Maybe I'll go a little bit darker. So be careful of going too dark, especially when you have bright sky like that, okay? I'm just looking at these bottom corners because I can always use the dodge and burn tool to darken the bottom areas without affecting the top corners, right? The landscape tool is a great one for images like this. So remember how I mentioned lots of yellows and greens, okay? There is some color adjustments that have been done. So let's see what that template was doing. So it looks like it's affecting the saturation of green a little bit. And that's about it. So it hasn't done a whole lot. You can also use this slider, which is really handy, remove color cast. And I find that sometimes if you have an image that is just looks off color, this one will do a really nice job in around the 10 to 20 range, just to get rid of some weird tints that you can't figure out or fix with the white balance settings. Right? I'm going to come back to the color panel after I do landscape. Right? So what's been applied here as part of the template is the golden hour. So it's giving the image this really yellow effect. I'm just going to take it up to an extreme. Okay, so see what that's doing. It's like the sun is setting. Okay, I always take my sliders far and then bring them back. Okay, so you can always say, oh, okay, this what this is doing. I like it. I don't like it, and let's go somewhere on the more subtle edge. Okay. Foliage enhancer, if I take this one all the way, you get this neon over the top green. Okay, so be careful of over editing your images. And I like to talk about what that means. And this is a great example. So over editing includes over sharpening. We talked about over editing the sky so that it becomes grainy and trying to pull data out that isn't there. Oversaturation is another one. Okay, so another danger of going too far. You don't want to make neon green, or as I call it, neon puke. So don't make neon puke. This one I find with the foliage enhancer, it does a good job, but it makes the greens sort of too bluish. So I usually go a little to the minus side, and you can see that if I go really far, I can actually turn this into a fall image. Right? And then of course I'm going to bring my amount back down. So I can really make this fall by going into the oranges here. I think somewhere, let's just go back to 0, somewhere around there. Okay, so I like what it does to the trees, but I almost always turn the foliage hue to the negative because it's too blue for my liking. Let's see what it's doing. We can also try a bit more dehaze. Again, take it to the extreme to see what it's doing. So because there's haze in this image, it's affecting the horizon the most, but I'm going to leave it sort of where it was. Okay, now we're going to get into our sky replacement, which is under the creative section. Okay, first thing you need to do is pick a sky. New in the latest update of Skylum, if you're not using the current version and you don't see things like the thumbnails and so on, make sure that you have the current version. So just do under the Luminar menu, check for updates. Okay, and it's telling me I'm up to date. Yay. If you're not up to date, just install the new version and then you should be able to see exactly what I'm seeing. I've got all the skies that I have, including my sky pack. If you could share a link to, there's 2 things I'd like you to share, Rob. There's a video I did on sky replacement in Luminar and also our sky pack. Okay. And I believe I have a coupon for that. Hold your horses. Where are we? Trying to find my notes here. Where's my sky pack? I'll find it later. I do we not have a coupon for that, Rob? I can't find my coupon code. So if we have a coupon for that, put that in the chat as well. I will put that on a banner. Okay, so I'm choosing skies, and I want to pick one that I think is going to go with this image because it's sunny. I'm going to try one that's fairly dramatic with a sun that's kind of coming between the clouds. Now that's pretty dramatic. But we can also figure out if it matches with some adjustments. Okay, this new horizon positioning tool allows me. Okay, so it's chosen the horizon there, which is incorrect. I'm going to bring it down. Okay, like about there. And I'm going to lighten this sky. Okay, so let's just see if I brighten this up, if it's going to fit better. So I want it to kind of look like the sun is washing across this valley here. And I'm doing that with these adjustments under the sky adjustment here. That's getting closer. Okay. I also may defocus it a little bit. If your background is out of focus, you want to put a sky in that's also out of focus, or you can use this slider here. So I would just check to see if these mountains are sharp or not. And I want to make sure that I match the sharpness of the sky or lack of with whatever's in the background. So the mountains are ever so slightly blurred. And that's why I'm going to go with like a minus or a 3 level on the defocus. Let's see. So I'm not crazy about this sky after it's all been sort of adjusted. I think I might choose a different one. It looks like it's not fitting as well as I would like in terms of the lighting. So let's try a different one. Maybe let's try this one. This is actually my favorite one in my set. It's got a lot of color, right? And I find that I can do a placement of it and make it look really nice on just about any image. A little vibrant. Let's try the scene relighting. So this is a tool that allows me to match the color of the image to the color of the sunset. Okay, because the sunset or the sky image that I've added has some pink and orange, you'll see that the sky is now reflecting that or into the landscape as well. I'm going to try one of Matt's sunsets. Okay, Matt Seuss has a bunch of sunsets as well and skies. Let's try one that's a little more sunny. Finding the right sky to put in your image is crucial because you want to make sure that the light direction matches as well as the color. Okay, that one does not match at all. Let's get rid of that guy. So I'm not having so much luck with this one. Let's try something different. There's one in here that's actually called Clear Skies, and I believe you can get it on the Luminar website for free on the Skyline website. Rob, if you want to find that one, there's the coupon. Okay, this is actually not bad. If I choose one of these here, I'm literally just choosing a blue sky and placing it in. Oops, that's a little too much. Let's go back to this one. I'm literally just choosing a light blue sky and replacing it with the faded out one that's there. So it's just giving it a little bit of color, right? Let's see if I can darken that a little bit. That actually looks really good. Maybe I'll warm it up a little so it matches. We're getting close. That looks pretty good. So the idea behind a sky replacement is it needs to fit. And I could actually spend quite a bit of time just looking through the skies and picking the right sky. Right? So I don't want to go too crazy on this one. That looks better. Let's just do that. There's no water here, so I don't have to worry about a reflection. And there's no people. Okay, so let's see what happens when I do this relight. Okay, so it should give me a bit more tonality in the landscape to match the color of the sky. The other thing you can do is if they're not matching color wise, you can go down here and add one of these LUTs under the mood tool, right, which will apply to the entire image, including the new sky. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and scroll through a couple of them. Okay, so I want, oh, that's nice. I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. That's pretty as well. Okay, so I'm just looking for something that helps the sky blend a little bit better. And that one actually does a really nice job. Okay, I'm just going to dial it down a little bit. In other words, what do we think? Okay, so it's taken that sky that was just completely washed out and made it sort of into a just soft, faded out like the evening sky. The other thing I might do with this image is I mentioned these little spots down the bottom here is just go into dodge and burn, right? And I'm going to darken. Always use the dodge and burn tool under 15. Okay, so under the strength, dial it way down. Okay, so you want to go in little by little and paint your darkness or your lightness in so that it looks like it blends, right? So if you go in guns a-blazing and paint at 100%, you're going to get something that doesn't blend. Okay, so the same as the vignette, you don't want to make stuff that stands out and you see the editing. You want to see the picture, not the editing. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm just sort of building this up, painting, just as if you were, painting a room in your house. You do one coat, you do another coat, you go and do another one, right? And I can do this one here or just go and erase it. I might just erase that guy. I think that's about it for this particular image. I would go in and use the erase tool and just get rid of that last bit of that was one of those little plants, and get rid of this guy. Right there. Let me see if we have any questions. Ron likes the improvement. Thanks, Ron. Okay, so I'm just going to erase that, and then we should be done with this image. The next one I'm going to do, let's back out and take one more look at the before and after. Now that we got rid of that little spot. I might play with the sky a little bit more. I'm still not happy with the color of it, but overall, I think this is a nice, pleasing image, right? Okay, now I have an image, and I'm going to bring this in Lightroom because I can show them side by side here. So this is another image by Albert, and I'm not going to fully work on this one today. I'm actually going to tease you and work on it next week because I already did Albert's rose, and I like to, share the love, right? Give everybody a chance. So what I want to show you is, let me just get myself off the screen here. So he shot this image two different ways, right? So there's a vertical and a horizontal. So I'm going to work on one of these images next week, and I'd like to hear from you. Which one do you think I'm going to work on and why? Or which one do you think is the stronger image to start with, right? Tell me what you think and why. Because the idea behind editing is you have to understand what your goal is. Okay, so what do you want to achieve with the photo editing? We want to bring out the subject. Do we want to get rid of some problems, right? In the last one that I just did in the landscape, the idea was to just tone down the sky and to bring out the trees, right? So part of that was problem control. Okay? Rob says, where's the subject? Okay, so what would you say here is the subject for those of you that are watching? Right, let me zoom in on one of these. Okay, so let's just take a look here. There's kind of a town or something down here, right? So there's a big rock, there's a river, looks like some docks, a little town on each side of the river, okay? Maybe a river boat in the middle, and then some clouds and sky off in the distance. Now, there's a really interesting sort of crag here or crevice that he's shooting through, right? Does anybody remember my trick for analyzing the image? Let's look at the horizontal one. Right. Now we have the same scene, but we have less up top and more on the left. Okay. Now, this is actually a great exercise. Okay. So I like the fact that he shot it both ways because then when you get back to the editing process, like we're doing now, you have a choice, right? You have options, right? If you only shot it one way, you don't have any options. Okay. So if you're not sure, try it both ways. Okay, so Holly is indicating my trick. She knows the trick. Okay, look at the image upside down. Okay, yes, Ron, exactly. So are you? You need to have your kitty upside down on your icon when you join us, Ron. Just flip your little emoticon upside down. So I'm going to turn this one upside down. And now where does your eye go? Right? Now that we're looking at the picture upside down, your eye will go naturally to the tonality and the pieces of the image that are going to draw your attention when it's right side up. But when it's right side up, you don't necessarily look at those things because your mind is tricked, right? Your mind is tricked to see a tree or this or that. Okay. And there's four things that will draw your attention. Put those at the bottom of the screen for you. Okay, so there's brightness, sharpness, color, and contrast. Okay, so in the scene, which is the brightest and most contrasty areas? Right, which are drawing your attention? Would be a great hike, do you say, Ron? Oh, you would. Oh, your kitty would be sick if he was upside down. Yes, I'm sure he would. Okay, so where does your eye go here? For me, it goes to the bright area of the sky and the top of this rock. Okay, but I'm pretty sure he's thinking that we want our eye to go to this town. So when you take your photo, you want to take these things into consideration, okay? That you want to make sure that this rock here, if you can't avoid it, you know you're going to have to edit this bright area later. Okay? So those are some of the things that I'm going to deal with. But like I said, I'm going to tease you. So you have to come back next week to watch how I edit those images, right? And I'm not going to tell you which one, okay? So Dan Canuck Dan. So does that mean you are in Vancouver or just Canada in general, Don? Are you a Canucks fan? So he prefers the portrait or the vertical up and down image, right? I'm not going to tell you which one I'm going to work on, so you'll have to tune in and see. All right, let's look at a different image. Let's go back to flowers. And this is a submission by another person who has done a first-time submission a couple weeks ago. And this is from Mark Shawley. And he sent me a couple of different images of sunflowers. So same question, right? I am going to edit one of these today. So which one does everybody prefer? Do you prefer the one on the left or the one on the right? Okay, so close up or the full field. And a lot of times I'm discussing things that can be done when you're doing the photography of these images as well. So because sometimes when you get an image that has a lot of challenges, it's often better to go back and reshoot it because you can't change things like the lighting or if a pole is growing out of a person's head, but you can when you're photographing it because you can move or you can control the time of day that you're photographing, right? If you haven't already done so, everybody that's watching, please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And yes, for those of you that joined in late, if you look at the community tab on our YouTube channel, any updates that we have regarding stuff coming up or little quick tips or things, also polls are under the community tab, right? So we've got left from Ron, left from Holly, Rob is struggling, and Canuck Don lives in Australia but born in Canada. Okay, so we've got a few living in Australia. You missed Linton was here earlier, and Ron is also from Australia, Don. So welcome. All right, so looks like the consensus so far is left. Rob, you're going to have to pick one or the other. And the reason that I'm going to work on the left one is because it's a stronger image, right? When we are talking about where's the subject, your eye gets lost here, right? We can do the upside down trick. And I can process this one because my eye goes to that sky, right? Because it's a big, bright area. I could process it so the sky isn't taking my attention away. But the fact that there's so many flowers and so many things going on, your eye isn't drawn to one thing, okay? Whereas when I go to the other one, immediately you know what the subject is, and it's got these, I'm assuming bees. Yeah, so there's 3 bees and another few bees over there. And this flower is quite sharp. You can even see the pollen that the bees are dropping. So this is the one that I want to work on. Okay. Now, because Mark is also a new person to photo editing, I'm going to do his image in Luminar as well. Okay. So right from the very beginning, okay, again, we can see the templates that Luminar suggests, landscape, nature, and this filmatic one comes up a lot, which is interesting, right? So you can decide if you want to do something that's completely different, okay, quirky, I like, or if you want to go with a traditional, right? This one kind of reminds me of like a 70s Polaroids. Remember the little Instamatics that would come out? They were kind of red, or Kodachrome was very red. The nostalgic one, okay, kind of faded out as well. So those kind of take me back a little bit. I'm going to see what the nature ones come up to. Now, Sunny Small, right? So this is Sunny Small, kind of. So let's see how it's doing. I think it's adding too much contrast, to be honest. And I think for this one, I'm just going to start at the beginning, right? Now, if you want to undo your adjustments, let me just get a drink here. There's a couple of quick ways to do it. You can right click on the image, choose adjustments, and then revert to original, right? Or you can go to history and go back to original. So history is a little clock over on the side, or like I said, you can go here, or if you know the shortcut, which is Shift Command R. Okay, so we're just going to backtrack a little bit to undo everything. So let's try that Enhance AI. Okay, let's see what accent does. And I'm just going to go and close Lightroom because I think we're done with Lightroom for today. And it's taking up a lot of my memory. Remember, just a quick reminder, back up your catalogs and make sure you back up your Lightroom catalog to a different drive than your main catalog is on. Okay, quick tip for the day. Because you want to make sure your catalog is backed up as well as your pictures. They do not live together. Okay? So let's see what this accent AI is doing. So it's trying to even out the tones, but what you want to watch for is see how it's creating sort of a halo around the sky here. And I don't like that. So when you start to see like the edge of the sky is dark and the other part is light, see like that, okay, that's a halo. Okay, so for people that don't understand, when people photographers or people like myself that are instructing talk about halos, that's what that means. Okay, so it's an outline of something that just doesn't look like it blends naturally. So I'm going to either keep accent AI enhance off or go sparingly. Composition on this one, actually I don't think I would do a thing. If anything, I might just go a little free edit on this one and change the cropping to get rid of some of the sky like that. Okay, so don't have as much blue, maybe not quite so much, like that. And the reason I'm not worried about the shape is when you go to share your images online or anywhere, you don't have to worry so much about the aspect ratio, which is the length to the width proportions. So if you want to crop it freeform, you can do anything you want, including, like Holly mentioned earlier, making a square. Right. This one might actually make a cool square if you want to do a square composition, say for Instagram. Okay, so let's give that a go. Okay, so that makes a nice kind of square composition, right? It's actually quite strong as a square. I used to shoot Hasselblad photography, a camera, which is media format square film. And when you're shooting with square film, you have to take a lot of different things into account, and the composition is very different. Okay, so I'm looking at the light panel again under curves, so I can see the histogram, and the exposure looks absolutely bang on here. I'm hitting J on the keyboard. There's nothing clipping. And what I want to do is create some blacks clipping. Okay, so I'm just creating a little bit of contrast. And if I punch that up just a tiny bit, I get some white clipping. Okay, so now I've got things clipping sort of on both edges or just touching the edge. I'm going to add some structure on this one. Structure and or detail. Okay, so structure is kind of like a grunge effect. You can see what it does. If you've used Lightroom in the past, it's like clarity. If we go minus structure, you get sort of this blur effect. And there's a trick that I'm going to show you with this one. Okay, so if we go minus, and let's take it extreme so that you can see where it's affecting things, okay? Because what if I want to make that background less obvious and focus on the foreground flowers, okay? I can use this tool and mask it, okay? So I'm going to use the erase tool on the mask, okay? So I'm going to paint. You have the choice of paint, radial, or gradient. I'm going to paint, but I'm going to paint with the eraser, meaning everything is going to apply except where I erase it, okay? As soon as I click, you'll see the red mask. And as I paint, you see I'm erasing it, okay? And I'm just going to get all these flowers in the foreground so that they are fairly sharp, so I'm not getting that blurriness. And I might do 50%. So you want it to blend because I don't want it to be sort of like all of a sudden the blur happens. Okay, so you want it to be a little more gradual. Let's try something like that. That looks pretty good. Let's see how realistic if I turn that off. And it's just minimizing that background a little bit. Okay, so now that I've got it where I want it, I'm just going to adjust the amounts again. So remember, go to extreme, do your masking or do your editing, and then adjust your sliders. It's easier to see where the effect is when you go to the extreme. And before I leave this tool, I'm going to go back into the mask tool, click the three dots, and copy the mask. Okay, this is a really cool feature that not a lot of people that use Luminar know about, because I'm going to do the same thing on the details panel. So I want to increase details small, medium, and large, and sharpness. But what's happening is it's increasing those things on the entire image. Okay, so I don't want to sharpen the part that I just blurred. So I'm going to open the mask and paste it in. But what happens is it's opposite of where I want it, right? I want the flowers to be sharpened. So I'm going to go back and invert it. So using the same mask, I was able to sharpen these flowers. And I might just go in and paint them in a little bit more. So I missed a bit. Okay. You can always go and refine your mask. So I missed the tips of this one. Like so. So now I've sharpened the flowers and blurred the background using those two tools. Okay, so even though the new portrait bokeh doesn't work on a subject like this, you can still use structure to do a minus, right? Let's try landscape on this one. We could do a little more golden hour and a little bit of that foliage enhancer. Okay, remember it's going to make neon, which we don't want. And then just dial it back a little. Definitely want a vignette on this one. So I'm going to make it fairly strong so I can see it. Now it's already round because the image is square, so it makes it from the edge. I'm going to put my vignette just around this one. Okay, so I want to make sure I get the sky. And let's do it like so. So I'm just clicking on the image till I'm happy with it. And then put my feather back. So I'm just double clicking and adjust the amount a little bit. Okay, so see how that's just drawing the eye up to this flower. Okay. I think I'm going to darken the whole image a tiny little bit. It's overall a little bright. That's better. And finally, I'm going to do one more thing on this one, and that's my favorite filter to use on landscapes or flowers especially, and that's mystical. It gives this great sort of glow effect to the image. Look at that, right? And let's try about 30. And if we're concerned about these yellows clipping again, remember we can go back into the color panel. Luminance is brightness, and we can play with the brightness of the yellows to try and get a bit more detail. Any of the warm colors like the red or the yellow, you have to be careful of oversaturating so that you lose actual detail, right? Because if there's too much saturation, you'll actually just print a big blob, right? So before and after. And if we decide we don't want the square, of course, we can always go back and recrop it. Now, hopefully, once I do that, all the other things that I applied will still look good on this cropping. It does. All right, how's our sunflower? Rob wants to know from Ron, or from Dawn. We have a Dawn and a Ron and a Rob to confuse me. How did you hear about our editing live stream to join us today? Tell us, Dawn. I would love to know. That's a very good question. Does anybody else have any questions about anything I'm doing in Luminar so far? I'm following along with the tools. We have a full playlist of Luminar AI tutorials if you want to share that with them as well. You can find all of our playlists under the YouTube channel where you are currently watching this video. If you're on Facebook, you can just head over to our YouTube channel. If you provide a link directly to YouTube for them, Rob, it's just youtube.com/digital photo mentor. And make sure you subscribe to the channel because then when I post new videos, you'll get a notice. Let's see. So we've done a couple of flowers and a scenic. Let's do one more scenic. And we're doing a bit more of a deeper dive on these today. So we're not going to do as many images, but I'm trying to give you a little bit more thorough idea of how I approach these things and why. Okay, so a lot of photo editing is not just the how, because you can take these techniques and apply them in a different tool. You could be applying this in Lightroom. You could be applying this in Photoshop or On One or whatever software you use, but taking the principles of that, what I'm teaching, and using it in your software. All right. So Don says he's been following me since the first release of Luminar. So that goes way back. If we're talking about Luminar 3, I think we're talking about like 2017. So nice to have you with us, Don. All right, so this image here, I'm just going to go in without a template and start working on this because I know what I want to do here. When I first look at this, the first thing you'll notice is the sky is really bright. So I want to make sure I can bring that sky and see if I can pull out some detail. Let's see if this is a raw file. This is an NEF, and this is from Ecom Guru, so I'm not sure who actually that is. If you are watching Ecom Guru, I would love to know your actual name if you would like to share that with us and where you are in the world. Okay, so like I said, the sky is really bright, so I'm going to try to minimize that. And we need to decide what our subject is here. Okay, so there's these orange trees over here, which are taking up at least half of the image. Then there's sort of a piece of a city and this bridge over here. Okay, there's a little trick in terms of composition, and I'm going to use this tool because it works really quickly. When you're dealing with an image, you read, I have to do this backwards because my camera is inverted. You read from left to right, at least we do in our society, left to right, top to bottom. Okay. So when you have an image like this, you follow the bridge into the image and you end up sort of in the trees. All right. And I'm not sure that it's strong enough to hold my attention there. So let's see what Luminar thinks we should do for a cropping. And I'm just going to move it down. So I would tend to agree with something like that because there's a lot of also white empty sky. I might even go a little bit farther, something like that, right? So when we have this many trees, we have what's called visual mass. So the fact that the trees are taking up almost half of the image physically tells the eye or tells the viewer this is a subject. Same with the sky. It's taking up half of the image. So if the subject is the bridge, it's lost. Okay, so we're going to try and bring that subject out. I'm going to go into crop about there. But before I do that, I'm actually going to flip it. Okay, now anybody that knows where this is, you may recognize if this is backwards. Okay. However, you could probably shoot from either side of the bridge, right? Trish already said flip it. Hey, I'm on it, Trish. I'm flipping. Right, so I'm flipping this image because now when your eye comes left to right, you follow the bridge into the village or into the town. Okay, so my eye stays over here as opposed to stuck with the trees. There's also a lot of foreground and stuff here, so I might even come in again and get rid of this bottom part, right? The base is nice though, so I kind of, I'm changing my mind. See, I'm changing my mind. Just get rid of that one rock. Very look for things on the corner. So what I'm looking for is there's this little, what I call little white thing on the corner. So I've made what's called an orphan, right? I've got this little white spot, and I can also see that we have something called chromatic aberration. Right? Who knows what chromatic aberration is, and can you see it on the screen? I'm going to go full screen here for you and get myself off. Can you guys see the chromatic aberration? Right? I'm looking at, there's a red outline along the tree here and a blue one on this side. Okay, so to fix that problem, you need to go down under optics in Luminar, and there's a tick box, remove chromatic aberration. Okay, now you can see that most of that is removed. Okay, if I go to advanced settings, you can see that I can also choose defringe, and it got rid of the rest of it. So when you have, defringe is different than chromatic aberration. Defringe is when you have a really bright area like this against a really dark area. Sometimes you end up with this sort of outline of a color. And both of these things are the inability of the lens to focus all of the layers of the image, the red, the green, the blue, at the same point. Okay. So if I turn that off, can you see it now? Look at this red line here and the blue line here. Let's see if we can see it on the other side. Oh no, here we go. I'm looking to see if I can see it better somewhere else. No, that's the best place. Right. So then all I need to do is those two little tick boxes and it removes it, right? It'll also help your image look sharper. So with this little white thing on the corner there, I would either crop it a little bit more, which is my inclination, and get rid of it, or clone it out, okay? So I think I'll just go in and come in a little bit tighter, just like that. So you really want to watch the corners, and now I'm afraid I've got a little black spot. No, that's better. I just don't want to have dark light, and then leave a light spot on the corner because your eye will go there, okay? Now we can try the Enhance AI. Okay, so that's doing a nice job. Ooh, look at that. Look at that sky. And look what happens when we do Sky Enhancer. Right, so this is one where I'm going to take this one high, because look what happens to this sky up here. All right, beautiful. I might end up cropping a little more to get that corner gone. And let's check our histogram. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. Looks evenly spaced, well exposed. Okay, so what I'm looking for in the histogram is not that it's in the middle and that there's an arch, but does it touch the edges or go off the edges? That's what I'm looking for. Okay, I'm going to give this one a touch bit of structure overall. Right, because look what happens if I do structure on the sky. Let's actually do that. Okay, because let's make it look like it's stormy, stormy, stormy. And I'm going to mask it with the gradient mask this time. Okay, and I'm just going to put it on the sky. And of course, what did I do? It's backwards. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay, see how that's affecting the sky only, right? So that is really punching up the sky nicely. And let's give details overall a little boost. This is something I do on almost everything, right? Sharpening and details. And our vignette is going to be helpful here as well. Okay, so this time I'm probably going to leave the vignette fairly oval like that. Let's make it a little smaller because I want to really sort of focus over here, and I want to keep this part dark and the bottom dark. So let's see how that goes. Make sure to soften it. Okay. Turn it on and off, right? There's a toggle switch so that you can see what it's doing. And that's doing a really nice job. So there's our before from right from the beginning, after. So far we're creating a really nice dramatic skyline here. And I think I'm just going to darken the whole thing a little bit, make it more dramatic. Like so. And it's a little on the blue side. So warm it up just a tiny bit. And I did not do my camera profile this time. Let's see if that gives us anything better. Ooh, vivid. Look at that. We get vivid trees, landscape. Let's go vivid. Awesome. Okay, so we're using most of the AI tools here: composition AI, enhance AI, and then the structure, which I applied to the sky. Okay, so keep in mind, you don't always have to do a sky replacement. If you have a wonderful sky like this, it was just a little bit washed out, but look how we were able to bring out the sky now. Okay. I might even do another little bit of dodging and burning here, but I'm going to do an advanced adjustment here real quick. I still think the color is off. Okay, so this is one where I actually might use that slider I told you about earlier, the remove color cast. Okay, so let's see what this one does, because I find that the whole thing is just sort of, I don't know, the water looks green, maybe dirty. Let's see what happens when we go extreme. It's making everything sort of bluer, but it's definitely picking up that color cast. So that does a good job. Okay. So instead of mucking around with white balance, I just did that. So I'm going to show you something advanced. If you go into the brush tool, which is local masking here on the right, and add a basic adjustment. So it's kind of like a layer, okay? Kind of like a layer. I'm going to darken everything and bring the highlights down. Okay, And what I'm looking at is I wanted to apply to the whole image, except maybe this middle part. And now that I'm looking at it, I go, wow, that actually looks really good. Okay, so what this allows me to do is to do some basic adjustments like this, but only have them apply on part or some of the image. Okay, so I'm going to apply this to most of the image except this middle part. Okay, so I don't want to darken this middle part so much, maybe a little bit less. Right, so I'm going to keep the eye in here like so. So I wanted to darken this foreground and the trees, and in doing so, I actually darkened the sky a little bit as well. Okay, so now my painting, my mask is gone too strong, and the reason for that is I painted at 80% opacity. So there's a lesson for you. So see how I've got the edge that's showing there? You have to be careful when you're painting, so I'm just gonna sort of paint it back in at a lower opacity because I want it to blend better, okay? So I want it to not have this dark edge. Right, so now when I paint, I'm just going to do it with less opacity. There's my mask. Okay, it's catching up. My computer is slowed down on me, so I'll let it catch up. All right, Holly wants to know if the subject is literally leaning left, like a flower or tree or a plane, but it's in the right of the frame, is that okay? Flipping doesn't look good for some subjects. Yes, exactly. You kind of have to use, your gut instinct and what feels right. Let me come back on the screen here. Use your gut instinct and what feels right. And also, if something has writing on it, don't flip it because then the lettering is going to be backwards, right? Lots of images where you frame the subject to the right, but the subject's looking or headed left. If you read the image left to right rather than right to left because of that. Yes. Also, if you're talking about a person, there's actually a subconscious thing where when the person is looking, I have to think about this, left, they're actually looking backwards versus looking right is looking forwards. Does that make sense when you see me? Okay. So it's kind of just a subliminal thing. Okay. All right. Now I've got my computer catching up, and let's check my mask. Okay. So I just wanted to blend that edge a little bit better because I did a lousy job of that the first time. There. Okay, so you want your mask when you're doing that to not have a hard edge, just like the halo, right? You want to have it gradually fade, just like your vignette. So you could see where I had painted, which is not ideal. Let's do a little more in here. So if I want to see what this is doing, just turn it off. Okay, so this is before I've done this adjustment. And come on. Work with me, work with me. There we go. After. Okay, so when I go back here, I can go back to the light panel and adjust my brightness a little bit if I want. But the overall image went from sort of dull and drab to pretty dramatic, right? And I could throw a mood or a LUT filter on this as well, or LUT tool, to give it more sort of a color or a stormy feel. We could add some birds flying in the sky with the extra augmented sky if we wanted. But I think this one doesn't need a lot. You don't have to go crazy. We could play with some LUTs. That one's not bad. It's got a pinkish color, just to see if we can add to that feel of a storm coming, because that's what it feels like to me. Right? Something a little bit more matte look, right? Looks like 80s picture. There's a little bit more red. Okay. And literally, I'm just sort of playing around here. I'm not particularly looking for anything. Oh, there is one that would work well on here, and that's dramatic, actually. So dramatic has gives you what's called like a local contrast. Okay. It usually lowers the saturation as a default. So I can put that back. And what I find is I usually lower the local contrast and increase the amount. And it gives you this, again, sort of grunge look with a desaturation. Okay. Do I like that? That's not bad. And to finish up, I would do the mystical again, maybe a little bit lower this time. Okay. And that's the picture. I'd probably go in and fix this spot here because there's a dust spot. This is actually when you see things like this, it's either a dust spot on a piece of dust on your camera sensor, or this one in particular, I'm going to actually guess is something on the front of the lens. So if you see something that's large like that, usually dust shows up just with little black speckles. And if you have something that looks like a circle like that, let me just look at the info and the image. Shot at f11. Okay, so when you shoot at f11 and you have something on the lens, so if it was raining, right, it looks stormy, and you got water droplets on the front of the lens, that's actually the water droplet being more in focus because you're using a smaller aperture, right? Let me go back over here again because I think we're going to wrap up for today. Let me call this back. Just a reminder, if you weren't here at the beginning, on our YouTube channel, we have several videos that are sorted into playlists, right? So you can see all of our different playlists here. You can sort them by popular and see which ones are for Lightroom or Luminar, depending on which software you're using. And under the community tab, I'd love it if you would fill in some of these polls. So if you like answering polls and giving your opinion on things, please fill in these polls and go crazy and fill them all in. You can scroll down, you can leave a comment, thumbs up, and so on. And these polls are things that help me determine what kind of videos to make for you next. Okay. So when I ask these questions, please give us some answers because that feedback is very valuable to helping me produce new videos. Let me get back over here. Okay, so that's about it for today. Like I said, we did more of a deep dive on fewer images, and I went a little bit further with them to show particular techniques. And honestly, I think I'm very happy with where those images went, and they could go a very different direction if you are doing them than I am doing them. So even if you feel like you are experienced and expert at photo editing, just for a fun game, send me a couple of your images. Keep in mind that the images that I want need to be in focus, right? I can't fix something that's completely out of focus. We can fix sharpness issues to a point. Images that are drastically or wildly under or overexposed, again, I can fix that to some degree, as you saw with the rose. But if something looks completely black or almost black on your screen, it's not salvageable. So try and give me images that are good pictures to begin with that need some enhancement, okay? Things that are more advanced, if you want me to try something like head swapping or removing objects, we can certainly give that a go as well. I also use Photoshop if you are a Photoshop user. So when you send your images, you can also ask a specific question and say, hey, how would you remove this garbage can in the background or something like that? And you can see I've lost the cat. She's probably gone to get something to eat. So that's it for today. Please remember, please give us a thumbs up to this video. Join us again next week at the same time and keep submitting your images. I've got quite a few more to go through and I love seeing what you send. I'll keep answering questions in the chat for a few minutes, but until next week, have a great week. Stay safe and keep practicing. Take care.